the other one, you bastard!
Cyberverse is a really weird part of the fandom, and it doesn't really get that much attention. Admittedly, I'm partly at fault by the fact that I haven't talked about it on this channel very much, but let's face it, it did have a bit of a rocky start. Then you have Cyberverse. Now we reach 2020 and Cyberverse is better than ever. The most obvious aspect would be the show itself, with one of the middle arcs of its third season providing some of the best Transformers television we've ever seen. I'm not joking about that. Seriously, combine some of the better parts of Beast Machines with elements of the Matrix and it is f***ing amazing. Then the toy line presented us with the Deluxe lineup. No, not the Warrior lineup, the Deluxe lineup. Basically, you've got Siege level engineering and Siege level articulation for fan favorite characters. And Thunder Howl for some reason. Even the gimmicky toys are getting better, with better levels of articulation, better build quality, and much better gimmicks to begin with. So today I thought I'd finally delve into that subset of the fandom that remains often neglected, and see what sort of fun there is to be found. Greetings Cybertronians, I'm Dr. Lockdown, and today's diagnosis pertains to Cyberverse Battle Call Officer Class Optimus Prime. The situation of this newish size class is actually kind of interesting, since from what I can gather it's a sort of half rebranding of the previous Ultimate class. When Cyberverse first started out, with all of its lackluster gimmick-laden hollow messes they insisted were somehow toys, and the Deluxe lineup wasn't even a twinkle in John Warden's eye, the Ultimate class was the last bastion of proper figure representation. They were far fewer in number than their mainline counterparts, but they, for the most part, delivered far more solid experiences with much better articulation. It wasn't perfect, but it was at the very least not as cynical. Then about halfway through, the cynicism caught up and the engineering plummeted. Granted, at the time the quality of the rest of the toys was drastically increasing, especially in the Legends lineup. Yes, you heard that right, Legends lineup. But it was still disappointing to see all of that chunky fun go to waste. This approach continues to this day, and I feel the most frustrating of the bunch would have to be how they handled Iaconus. In the show, he practically helmed the climax, delivering by far one of the best Titan fights the franchise has to offer. Although to be fair, that isn't really saying much considering the only television competition was whatever Machinima decided to shit out. However, fortunately for those who've been keeping up with the toy line since its infancy, this void was filled by a new size class, which funnily enough is basically the exact same thing but with lights and sounds installed. And with Battle Call Optimus Prime here, I feel we finally have reached the pinnacle of what Cyberverse is capable of anyway. In vehicle mode though, yeah, some sacrifices have been made. This is a pretty messy truck, not as messy as some of the vehicles I've taken a look at recently, let alone some I'm going to verbally demolish in the future, but it's still clear that for the purpose of the gimmick, some sacrifices were made. Still, there is quite a bit to like here, especially in the front. The flat nose section of the truck is done remarkably well, and I have to put emphasis on the word flat, because they've basically taken the whole Authentics design and run it over with a steamroller. It's pretty much the G1 cab, but put through a swole filter, and I'm all for it. It's also painted remarkably well. The windows don't require anything, given their light-up feature, and thankfully this looks better than the Netflix version, but they haven't skimped anything, thankfully. You've got paint on the wipers, the floodlights, the headlights, and they've picked out the entire grille and bumper section in grey. And thankfully it doesn't look dull, even if I would have preferred a silver finish instead. I get why they did it as such though, as it's closer to how he looked in the cartoon. And hey, something as simple as this is a much better choice than going all simple like the Masterpiece figures. And looks-wise, that's the only real positive section I can find about the visual aspect of this vehicle mode, because holy moly, this is a mess. Just to clarify though, I don't hate it. I get what this is supposed to be. The target audience isn't primarily adult collectors, it's little kids. This is supposed to be an Optimus Prime for little Billy to drive around, so the messiness is fairly forgivable. This isn't the same as an expensive collector's edition that just gave up in the design aspect for the purpose of robot mode accuracy. Yes, the sides kinda go all over the place. Yes, the armor is sitting on the back here completely out in the open. Yes, the feet go through virtually no transformation. For kids aged between 5 and 10 though, this thing is probably going to be the coolest shit you could possibly give them. Besides, it wears its shamelessness on its sleeve. It knows what it's trying to be, and it at the very least tries to look like an alt mode. As far as that goes, it succeeds. Faults and all, it's incredibly fun to roll around. I realize it may seem counterintuitive to review a toy aimed at a younger audience on a channel aimed at adult collectors, because this channel definitely ain't for kids. But even for older fans, this evokes a sense of childlike wonder. It's clear that the designers actually gave a shit this time, as opposed to whatever the Ultimate class devolved into after the first season. The only two elements I feel justified in complaining about are the fact that the legs don't tab into the cab, which is a bit of a bummer, and the fact that it's a little too easy to disengage the armor. There probably should have been some extra clips on the arms to keep this locked in place. You may be asking though, why does he have a random armor piece that folds over? Well, this is in relation to the gimmick. It doesn't look that great in vehicle mode, as this isn't its intended purpose, but not to worry. You'll notice that on the side Inside here, he has a switch. This actually activates a lights and sounds feature, and as far as the vehicle mode is concerned, there are 2 different sounds you can cycle through. Once again, I can't help but feel giddy whenever I activate it, but not for the reasons you might think. This feature is voice activated and responds to pretty much anything you say. As such, you can get some pretty funny results.
Honey, I am pregnant!
Fortunately, they had the foresight to allow you to turn this off. It would have been pretty awful if you constantly walked past this thing only to scare yourself half to death when you hear it go off. Honestly, I wish more sound features had this functionality. Even if they don't need it, sound chips can sometimes be a little bit glitchy. I have very frustrating memories from when I was a kid where I would try to get a good night's sleep only to have Revenge of the Fallen Devastator grumble a demonic gurgle. I realize sound gimmicks in themselves are quite rare these days, which makes it confusing why the Masterpiece version incorporates them on what is supposed to be a display piece. But if the franchise ever does return to this style of gimmick on a wider scale, I hope they retain this smart functionality, and props to being able to engineer it in properly without having it end up as a bulbous backpack. Sound gimmicks are notorious for being difficult to incorporate into the design, so definite props. Anyway, as far as accessories go, you do get a bit of weapon storage. Some pretty awful weapon storage. Yeah, it's fine. For a toy aimed at young'uns, it doesn't really matter if the weapon storage isn't as good as some of the recent Studio Series offerings. Plus, it has the added bonus of locking in both the legs and the head trigger chestplate gimmick. It also has some really neat functionality in itself, but I'll save that for the robot mode. Anyway, size-wise, he's actually quite a chunky fella. You're basically getting an almost classic leader, lights and sounds and all. However, the price is 10 Aussie dollary dues cheaper than what those leaders were back when they were that size. Considering the price in relation to his size, I can easily forgive a lot of the shortcomings this alt mode presents. And hey, it at least looks better than the ultimate version from back in Wave 1. Look, I like this figure, and from a design standpoint, it's easily more cohesive, but this design is a shit show. And at least the gimmick on the officer class version actually stays in place more often. Yeah, that's how loose the original was. But comparisons and such aside, it's obvious this vehicle mode isn't going to be the greatest thing since the Blues Brothers, but you can tell the designers weren't high off their face when designing it. It's compromised, but it has a solid core. Kids receiving it are going to be greeted with an experience that echoes the love and care that goes into most Transformers, and adult collectors are going to feel like little kids again. But none of that is why I decided to review it. I typically only review figures where I can provide a unique angle on them, and as far as the vehicle mode is concerned, I'm not finding it the easiest to deliver. But the robot mode? Well, that's a doozy. If you've ever transformed a G1 Optimus of any style, then you know exactly how this is going to transform. It is a pretty simple Optimus Prime. There are no real special tricks to it aside from something in the arms, which I'll get to, and it is greatly appreciated, but everything else is just basic. Much like many gimmick-heavy Optimus Primes, the first thing you want to do is bring down the front panel here, and that will actually unlock that little tab there. That is how it discerns whether it's going to do the robot mode sound effects or the vehicle mode sound effects. And then the arms do an Optimus folding out like so, although you have to be careful that in the process you don't disengage the backpack. And then this is the really cool part that I actually like. You fold the arms down, fold the fists out, and then you fold it in on itself. The reason I like this quite a bit is because it reminds me of X2 Toys Giga Raiden, and it was a pretty neat trick. Plus, this time you don't have to deal with the sliding rails, so it's greatly improved. Anyway, from here, the waist swivels 180 degrees, and you bring the legs down, and damn, the legs are really tight, which is great for tolerances in robot mode, but can make the transformation a bit eh. Unfortunately, this back panel doesn't go anywhere. I just kind of sit it up there, or sit it back here if you want to access the waist swivel in robot mode. Separate the legs, and then disengage the ankles so that you get access to the full articulation. Yes, he has ankles, I'll get to that in a bit. And last but not least, you've got this panel that folds in here and clicks onto the back, and then you take your fingernail and try to get Optimus Prime's beady head out of there. It's pretty squished, but again, I'll get to that later. It's funny, recently I've been reviewing a lot of simple but effective Transformers, and Optimus Prime is another one of those, but again, emphasis on the effective part. Not every Transformer has to be the simplest thing on the planet, but conversely, not every Transformer has to be the most complex. Both can be good in both instances, and this is a pretty fun transformation, even if it doesn't have a lot of steps. And in robot mode, yeah, this is what I'm talking about! This is Optimus Prime. All of the heroism, all of the vibrancy, all of the action, it's all crammed into this pretty f***ing neat package. This is the kind of toy that you want new fans to grow up with, where the personality just oozes from every ounce of the sculpt work. Backing up a bit, the Cyberverse design is, as covered earlier, somewhat based on the Authentics design. That design was dog shit, though. It tried to do what the Bumblebee version actually succeeded in doing. Thankfully, the Cyberverse rendition was able to get away from a lot of those hang-ups because the people working on the show actually knew how to design a character properly, thanks to their work on my childhood and my sister's childhood. But even so, there was always going to be that jank that they couldn't shake. Until now. The limbs were always going to be done well. This design presents masterful sculpt work at every point thanks to a very well realized cartoon model. The shoulders feel extra heroic thanks to the slight spike that alters the contouring. And the legs have always been great with the side armor on the thighs and the new vent designs that take the original concept and give it so much more character. I've heard people complain that some of the black paint applications should have been grey or silver, but honestly I'm loving this choice. It adds a hint of meanness to any pose, just a smidge, but it is there. But those were always going to be the cool aspects of the vehicle mode. The biggest hurdle was getting over the issues with the chest. Now, Optimus Prime's chest in the show is actually pretty decent, but every toy I've seen, with the exception of the Ultimate class mentioned previously, has seemed unable to properly engineer the torso. As such, they've used the Authentics design as a crutch, taking more inspiration from that. And yeah, this ain't a good torso. I don't know what they were thinking, but this thing has got to be one of the worst Optimus torsos I've ever come across. This isn't just bad, it's vomit-inducing bad. Finally, though, with the exception of, again, the Ultimate version, we have a return to the classic Cyberverse styling, albeit missing a few paint applications. You've got nice chunky square windows and a properly angled midriff, as well as a grille that actually looks like a grill. I'm not obsessed with accuracy as long as you deliver a good design. Not a lot of these Optimi have delivered a good design, so seeing a return to form is incredibly refreshing. That's not the only thing that makes this robot mode awesome though, and many such design choices won't even factor into the decision of whether this should be purchased or not. No, that lies in the articulation. Prime basically has everything you could ask for, bar a wrist swivel thanks to the hinges used in transformation. This is what I'm talking about. A figure this size deserves articulation like this, and the fact they've left it this long is criminal. Sure, you do have to contend with the back panel getting in the way of the waist swivel, but taking into account the price and the fact that he even has a waist swivel to begin with, yeah, I think I can let this one slide. Suffice to say, this guy can lay it down. Get down, you little ma, what a fool, little and if that wasn't good enough, the weapon functionality is pretty damn awesome as well. The two combine into a storage option as seen in the vehicle mode. However, in robot mode this actually serves a pretty neat option. Having the sword and shield together is very reminiscent of proper sword storage as far as I recall, although drawing it off the back isn't something that many were able to accomplish. Sorry anime fans, but that's not how scabbards work. The scabbard slash shield is also very well painted, with loads of extra black and a lovely dab of extra blue. It feels as though there was meant to be an extra Autobot logo here, but they probably ran out of the budget after the articulation. The really cool part though is that when you separate them, you get some pretty damn neat automorph. It's simple, but very effective. And with them separated, you can engage in Joe Cat's favorite weapon combo, which when combined with the posing options gets you a lot of play value. And if you don't like the butterfly look, you can always close the shield back up. It's not spring-loaded, so you shouldn't have any issues. The only two gripes I have with this figure are still pretty understandable in the grand scheme of things. First off, yeah, the backs of the legs are hollow. Once again though, price and size. And second, yeah, this head is pretty bad. This is one I do still find annoying, as understandable as it is. Thanks to the gimmick, the head has been squished along the X-axis. I never was a fan of the Cyberverse head design to begin with, but this makes it even worse. Still, if they hadn't made it so small, the gimmick wouldn't have worked, and said gimmick does negate this issue. Speaking of, it activates about the same way you'd expect it to. Flick the switch and shout at it. Yep, that's all there is to it. If you talk to it quietly, it provides some voice lines.
Decepticons, Megatron, now we end this once and for all. Bumblebee, follow me. Autobots, shields up.
However, it seems to register decibel levels, so shouts at it and...
G1 sucks dick!
Bingo! And failing that, you also have a lever here that activates the springs manually, so if it ever runs out of battery or the electronics get f***ed, you can still have a pretty good time. And after making sure the breastplate is securely locked into place, my word, I like this way more than I expected to. For starters, this is a way better head sculpt. Not only is it an improvement on the squished stock head, but compared to the gimmick system heads that he was provided with in prior sublines, it's a massive step up. For once, this actually looks like Optimus Prime, as opposed to Dreadwing or the man who decided to become the KFC's secret 11 herbs and spices. Some have drawn comparisons to Soundwave, and in the sense of his visor, I can kinda see it, but those ears are unmistakably Optimus. The armor though, honestly, I wasn't expecting to like it this much. Somehow though, I really enjoy what they did here. Despite being clear plastic, you can still make out a lot of detail. It flows remarkably well, even though it's held together by a bunch of spring hinges. Yes, the tabs on the midriff can be a little bit distracting, but again, look at that price tag. Some may complain that the loincloth doesn't tab into the pelvis, but thanks to this oversight, he retains the full range of motion in the waist. Matter of fact, none of the articulation is affected at all, especially since the shoulder sections easily move out of of the way. The only thing I'd change would be to add an Autobot symbol on the front, but a simple repro label should suffice for now. Either way, this is way more fun than I thought I'd be having with this. Everything in this robot mode seems to work. It retains that classic leader charm that so many figures have been lacking. The last time a figure truly felt like a leader was Wave 1 of Studio Series, and even then that's debatable because I'm looking at Blackout through a heavy nostalgic lens. This is the kind of toy kids deserve to get with their saved up money or good deeds towards a Christmas present, but also the kind of toy that any adult collector who's willing to give it a chance will have a blast with. Hell, you can always have a little bit more mature fun if you know what I'm saying. Optimus Prime, activate your spark armor, you f***ing asshole! Also, he has slightly different voice clips in Armored mode, with a voice filter added to make him seem more powerful.
Autobots, attack! Autobots, engage the Matrix of Leadership!
Funny how this actually sounds a little better than he typically does in the show, although that may just be me. Oh, and he doesn't gain that much height from the armor mode, although I guess that's to be expected considering the only difference is a larger head sculpt. Anyway, if you're a Cyberverse fan, you should probably go out and buy this. If you're not, you should probably watch Cyberverse. Don't worry, you can skip Season 1 if you find it boring, unless you're the kind of guy who thinks Siege is the best show on the planet. Cyberverse is here to deliver you a wonderful experience, until the cancellation catches up to it. I am concerned for the future of the franchise. When it comes to the Cyberverse toy line, it's not too dissimilar to how you compare kids' films with family films. Kids' films are often cynical, derivative, and only there to make a quick buck, much like the first wave of Cyberverse. However, family films deliver heartfelt experiences that stay with children as they grow into adulthood, and adults will enjoy them on the strength of their character, much like Seasons 2 and 3 of Cyberverse and the toy line that accompanied it. These days, the argument that kids deserve better is often met with criticism, but I still stand by it, and this figure is evidence of what you can do when you truly embrace that criticism. And even beyond that, it's just fun. Yes, the alt mode is somewhat compromised, but it's still quite fun to handle, and at least it knows what it wants to be. It's a kid's toy, not a high-end Generations figure, and it's not trying to deceive you with the box art either. And Jesus Christ, the articulation on this thing is almost perfect, for what they could do at the price point anyway. It's toys like this that make me wish Cyberverse wasn't cancelled, but it may be too little too late. Oh well, at least this Optimus Prime is here for now, and he will be for a very long time, which is a good thing, because it's awesome.